In a departure from our usual content on the Fitness channel, going to be talking about double hip replacements and what you can expect as a mixed martial artist if you go through that type of surgery. This is actually the third part of a series I've done on this topic, or on the topic of hip replacements, I should say. So the first in the series I did in 3 to 4 months after my first surgery, my first single hip replacement. I also did one year after that first hip replacement, and then since then I've now had my second hip done. So what we're going to be showing today is some footage of what my training looks like 1 year after my second hip replacement, so the other side. So when I say double hip replacement, it's a little bit of a misnomer, because in my particular situation, I didn't have them both done at the same time. I had them done a little over a year apart. So first my right hip was done, then my left hip was done. So just a caveat there. So, that was done based on the advice from my doctor. He didn't want to do them both at the same time because of morbidity and mortality rates, apparently. It's much safer to do them spaced out. So anyway, that's a little bit of background there. I'm going to be showing a wide variety of footage from my different types of training that I do, my solo training. I'm not going to be showing any sparring or anything like that. I haven't really returned to full training mode with sparring partners, except to the degree I'm helping to teach my kids. Taking a step back, so some details on my particular surgery, my particular process, which may be different from yours, and thus you may have some different experience following it. But basically, both of my hips I had done, again, about a little over a year apart. Both of them, I had a full hip replacement, so it's not a resurfacing or anything like that, and it was the anterior approach for both hips. Meaning not the posterior approach, not the lateral approach. So if you have any of those kinds of scenarios, you might experience something different. Also, I had a specific type of device that was implanted for both my hips. Both of them, I had a dual mobility hip joint with the ceramic head. All right, so that supposedly should give me a little bit more mobility than a traditional single mobility joint. So if you have any questions about that kind of thing, about the details of that, please, put them in the comments. Also, you should be aware that everything you're going to see here, this is after some very intensive physical therapy and some really hard work to get back to where I am currently. And that entire program, I actually put together an entire program for these purposes so that you can utilize this as well if you're going through something similar and you need a process to get back on track after you've had the surgeries. There's an entire 7-level physical therapy and workout program that I put together for after you have a hip replacement or multiple hip replacements. So you can find that on the Fitness channel. You can search that. And we have it, I believe we have it listed under hip replacements or hip replacement recovery workout program, as I recall. So that being said, let's get into the footage, and I will narrate as we go along to help you understand what's going on. All right, let's get into it. We're going to start with basic strength, mobility, and flexibility. Here you see some pistol squats, assisted or balance assist. Usually I'd be able to do these without that balance assist, but not possible yet. Here's some Cossack squats. Doing them as a squat is a little bit more difficult. Here you see me moving into more of a stretch, using it as a stretch, doing it slowly, and have a lot easier time getting low on it. Here we have some front kick mini squats. Not too much of a problem getting that kick up, but this took, remember, about a year to get back to this level. Here doing some side kick mini squats. Similar thing. I've got some pretty good height on the stretch there, but again, took about a year to get to this. Very slow progress. Roundhouse hip articulations. That is gradually improving, getting better and better. And here we see, where my middle split stands at this point. Again, taking quite a while to get back to this stage in terms of my flexibility. Flexibility is one of the more difficult things to reacquire, I've found. Here's the runner split and where that stands so far. I used to be able, for reference, before having hip problems, I pretty much had a full runner split all the way on the ground. Middle split, I could never be fully on the ground, but I was pretty darn close, just a couple inches over the, over the floor. This is an important stretch you're going to need to use to loosen up your hips. And here we have, the pancake, as they call it. This is also another important stretch you'll need to utilize to get your hips back to where you need to be in terms of mobility. I used to, again, for frame of reference, I used to be able to put my feet behind my head. Here we start moving into some actual technique, some footwork, evasions, and blocking. Moving forward and rearward, moving laterally is not much of a problem. I have a pretty upright stance, so my movement is a little slower than it would be if I had a lower stance. But here you see some ducking, slipping, and rolling, basic boxing evasions. No problems here. I'm switching to southpaw. You'll see that throughout this. That's one of the things I've done to change my training. I do a lot on both sides, orthodox and southpaw now, which was not the case prior to having hip problems. I was very, I am naturally dominant, right-hand dominant, so I'm typically an orthodox stance fighter, but I've been working on the southpaw stance a lot to try to limit my hip issues. Here you see some knee blocking of various types. No problems there on both sides. Again, all this took, a lot of work to get back to. Here we move into some boxing, and I will say straight off the bat that boxing, for the most part, is not a problem. So because it's, very upper body dominant. The footwork also not too much of an issue. Here I'm doing a lot of stance switching. Not something I always do, but in this particular drill, I am showing a lot of stance switching and footwork here. I will say that anything upper body, in terms of upper body strength workouts, not a problem at all. I mean, even just like within the first month or two after getting the surgery, I was able to get back into strength workouts for the upper body. Here we're going to show a bunch of ground grappling movements. I'm going to be showing escapes from various positions. I will say that for the most part, I don't have any problem moving around on the ground at this point. My hips are mobile enough to be able to bridge, to be able to shrimp, to be able to escape from a variety of positions. This one's a little bit more difficult, the flat shrimping, but still can do it. Yeah, the hip mobility, for ground movements is mostly back to where it needs to be. Here you see a runner's escape from knee on belly, and here we start to see some guard sweeps and reversals. Similarly here, the hip movement is pretty good. Shrimping or the ebby is not a problem. You see I can articulate my legs, both legs, without too much of an issue. Yeah, basically any kind of rolling around on the ground, jiu-jitsu type movements, or ground-based, wrestling, not an issue. Here, we're going to start incorporating some striking. You see some knee strikes there, not a problem at this point. In this particular drill, what I'm doing is transitioning from one position to another on the ground, in top positions, striking, and then going for a particular submission. You're going to say, again, similarly here, incorporating the striking with the ground-based movements is not an issue. Even including the knees, along with the hip articulations and transitioning, very little problem in terms of movements. What you do have to watch out for is like banging your hip on the ground, banging your prosthesis on the ground, like in that reverse Kasakatami you see there, or in a regular Kasakatami. Or scarf hold. You see here, even I'm in the high mount, or the S mount, I can still, articulate the hips in different directions, and it's still not problematic. Here we're taking the back, going for the body lock, the rear triangle, and moving into rear mount armbar. Similar here, going for a triangle choke. No problems with that. Here we're seeing guard submissions, guard striking and submissions, I should say. Swinging the leg around for the armbar and the guard, not an issue. Now we're starting to see a little bit of kicking from the ground there. We're going to see a lot more of that later. We'll get back to that. So this should give you an idea of what the groundwork looks like. Here we're seeing some stand-up grappling. My sprawls are back to pretty much where they should be. I can get those hips close to the ground, you see on that half sprawl. And then we see some drop steps here. My drop steps are much better than they were after the first surgery. After this, 1 year after the second, they're good. I can even add, a weighted vest here and go, and lift objects off the ground, with the drop step, also with the fireman's carry. So yeah, I mean, strength and mobility is pretty good there. We're going to see more stand-up grappling. Now we're going to move into kicks, which is probably where most people are interested. Front kicks are, for the most part, not problematic. You're seeing, both orthodox and southpaw stance here, both lead and rear legs. All right, so we're now on southpaw, the lead leg. Again, southpaw is my non-natural stance. You see the height on the kicks, one of the things you're going to notice in all the kicks I showed you. Here's some combinations using the front kick. One of the things you're going to notice is that when I start throwing combinations, the height is good when I throw single kicks, but when I throw combinations, it's much harder to get the height. On the side kicks here, you'll notice in order to get that, the head level side kick, I need to really turn my body around and make it almost like a back kick. I can't just bring it up sideways like I used to be able to do. So there's a lot more body rotation required and pivoting on that back foot in order to get that side kick up high. More like a body level side kick is a little bit easier for me to do without turning my body all the way around, which we'll see some of that here. Right, so here's side kick in combinations. All right, the rear leg side kick, I have a lot of trouble getting it up high, but I can still utilize it. The side kicks on both sides are pretty decent. Right, roundhouse kicks. All right, so roundhouse kicks we'll spend a little bit more time on here because probably a lot of you, depending on what arts you do, if you're Muay Thai focused, you're probably using a lot of round kicks. Here's my lead round kick on the orthodox stance. We got the rear leg on the southpaw. See, the height is pretty decent. I would call it like neck level, but not necessarily head level. I can, or for somebody my height, it's probably head level, but, if for somebody it's a little bit taller, I'd have some trouble hitting the head. Probably getting over the top of the shoulder and hitting the neck is probably about what I could achieve for somebody that's a little taller than me, and not much more than that. So we have the rear leg here, but I would say that the power is pretty good. It's not quite what I used to have in terms of kicking power. But it's pretty decent. I mean, if I land somebody flush, I'm going to knock them out. The problem is, again, once you start incorporating in them within combinations, it's a lot harder to get those kicks up high, although that one was pretty decent. And here we'll move into a few other different types of kicks. Hook kicks, crescent kicks, and axe kicks. So the hook kicks, I got some pretty good height and power. I usually throw my hooks kicks to the side or back of the head. Here we see some outside crescent kicks with both legs, both stances. Here we're going to see some inside, which is not one of my favorite kicks, but I do practice them anyway. Right? You see they're a little awkward there. And that's part of because of the hip articulation is not as good as it used to be, but it's still decent. Here we see some axe kicks. You see my height is okay. Again, not as high as I used to be able to get them, but it's okay. I could land an axe kick here, and if the timing is correct. All right, here's some inside to outside axe kicks, both lead and rear legs, which is usually they would actually throw it, as opposed to just straight up the middle. Okay. So here we see some of these in combinations. Hook kicks in combination is what we're seeing now. Here's the rear leg hook kick. Here's a triple kick using the hook kick. Here's the outside crescent. We're going to see an inside crescent. See an axe kick here. I know we'll get into some spinning kicks. So, you'll see here what I'm using is an assisted turning back kick. You know, that's one of the biggest problems I've noticed when I do turning back kicks. It's hard for me to keep the balance and get height on it when I'm turning around, which is not as much of a problem in the past. So one of the things I've moved to is this, trick I learned from, Taekwondo, this Japanese martial art where you basically plant your hands on the ground when you throw the back kick. You can get a lot better height on it. So that's when I've kind of adapted to using and started using that instead of a more conventional, turning back. Here you're seeing a spinning hook kick. Spinning hook kicks, my flexibility is not quite at once was, so they're not as fluid and fast but I can still land it. The height is also not quite there. Height and power is not quite what it used to be, but I can still do it. Right? It's not perfect, but it's functional. All right, so here we're going to see some stuff, the turning or the spinning kicks in combination. So here's an example of what I mentioned before. Without using the hands, the turning back kick doesn't get as much height as I'd like to. This is a spinning hook. All right, here we're going to start incorporating knees or headbutts, elbows, and knees. And I would say here, just generally speaking, there is no problem using headbutts, elbows, and knees. It's the same. It's not much different from, just throwing kicks. I'm just incorporating them in stuff that, in combinations that are, more conventional kickboxing combinations. Here's more like Muay Thai style combos. But similarly here, with the knees, one of the things you're going to see here is knees to the body and to the legs are not much of a problem. But if I throw like an uppercut knee, which we'll see maybe here in a moment, not quite yet, but if I throw an uppercut knee like here, it doesn't get that high. It's not really to head height. I would really need to bring somebody's head down to get them to jack them in the head. Okay, so here throwing some, and now incorporating some sweeps, so a little bit more, ballistic movement, right, on some of this stuff. And I have, at this point, really no problem doing that, right? So I can do some reasonably acrobatic stuff in terms of my sweep capabilities. Here I'm starting to incorporate some throws, some stand-up grappling, so this is really more stand-up MMA, all right? So I'm incorporating throws along with my striking combinations. And I would say that, for the most part, throwing techniques are not a problem for me. Even lifting and, which a lot of throwing techniques, forward or front throwing techniques require, it's not a problem. I can lift some reasonable weight and still articulate the hips and do things to even throw that, those follow-up roundhouses, or knees or front kicks. And things are reasonably fluid. All right, let's see what else. So this is one thing, when you throw that uchimata there, that inner leg reap throw, that is problematic. I end up having to put my hands on the ground, right? But here, now we're going to move into a drill where it's basically everything together, including stand-up striking, takedowns, submissions, and then standing back up. Basically, MMA, both standing and ground. So one of the things that's a little bit different about this, you'll see once I go to the ground, there's going to be hip articulations there, and when I stand back up, you'll notice that when I stand back up, when I do the technical lift as they call it, or technical stand up, I don't really have a really wide base. It's a little bit off balance. I have to kind of like focus on standing up back up properly. You'll see here, but I still can do it. You just got to watch out that you're doing it, being technical about it. Okay, we got some knees, got some hip articulation there, to jump around the guard. No problems in terms of the movement. Here's a Kouchigari, or a crossing inside trip into the Kimura. Kimura, when I put that on, usually my hips would be lower than that, and it's a little bit harder to do that now than it used to be, but it's still functional. Rearward knee trip takedown, no problems. Relatively high front kick there to a rear or side trip takedown. No problems there. Getting around to the opponent's back. There's an inside trip from the back into the rear naked choke, and also no problems there. Now look at a drop seonagi, as they call it, or one arm shoulder drop takedown, and that's it. All right, there you have it. That's pretty much what my solo training looks like to this point. When you're following my second hip replacement, I'm continuing to improve. So, even since that footage was taken, I've now been able to improve the height of my kicks within combinations. And one of the ways I've been able to do that is by slowing the combinations down and really focusing and basically pausing in between any upper body strikes and the actual, any attempt at a high kick, and that allows me to, focus more on elevating the kick, and etc. I've also, started to use a new, strength training program for my hip flexors and, the joints around the hips to try to get my kicks up to the height and to the power that they once were, and I'm making progress. So. What you're seeing, when you're following is not necessarily the end of the road. You can continue to progress after that, in my experience anyway. Everybody's going to be different. But I would tell you that if you're going through something similar and you need some kind of guidance on a recovery program, please take a look at the 7-level hip replacement recovery workout program that we have on the Fitness channel. Obviously you want to review it with your doctor before you use it. But it is the exact program I use to get back to where I am now, what you've seen in the footage there. So hope you like this. If you have any questions, please, just leave them in the comments section. I'll try to answer them to the best of my abilities. Also, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for the Fitness channel. Most of what we do in this channel is not just about hip replacement. It's about mixed martial arts training in general and mixed martial arts and fitness training at home. All right, a lot of solo training stuff. So hope you like it, and see you next time.